In this presentation, we are going to introduce customization using Cascading style sheets. For those coming from the Create or Modify Gennaro Presentation Styles presentation, I've returned the presentation styles resource file default.4st to its original state. I will now use a CSS file to make the labels on my application red. The steps for adding a CSS to your application are shown on this slide. Create an alias for your CSS directory, create your custom CSS file, create a template file that uses the custom CSS, and then make sure the template element for the theme used for your application is pointing to this modified template file. I will be demonstrating these steps during the remainder of this session. I first create a CSS file named customstyles.css and save it in the directory C custom_gwc web. Within this file, I'm providing the code that sets the labels red. The .g label is a selector, which in this case means for all labels of the application. Within the curly braces, we have the CSS code that sets the color to red. As far as writing CSS, you provide a selector name and a declaration block. The declaration block contains your declaration, which consists of properties and values. The example shown is for the G toolbar selector, which is for all toolbars. You can see that several declarations are listed between the curly braces. Reading through these properties and values gives you an idea of what type of properties can be set for a toolbar. The GWC has a variety of selectors defined, and you will find these listed in the GAS documentation under the heading Template CSS Reference. The properties for these selectors are the standard properties allowed by CSS. They're not explicitly listed in our documentation, but can be researched on the w3c.org site or in any CSS reference manual. Next, I create an alias for the directory in which I put my CSS file. This is added to the Interface to Connector section of the as.xcf file. I edit the file to add my alias. Here I'm going ahead and copying a previous alias. I place a comment in so I know where my aliases begin. I go ahead and paste the copy, and then I modify the ID. Here I'm going to modify it to say custom gwc/web. And then I modify its value, and I'm going to modify the value to point to C:\custom gwc/web. Next, I need to modify my template to reference the new CSS. For this example, our application will be using the DUA_Ajax mode, which in turn maps to the cpn.theme.ajax.gwc theme. I find the template entry and see that the template file is main.xhtml. I next trace the resource to find out which directory is storing this main.xhtml template file, and find that it is the set1 subdirectory. I go ahead and I open this file for editing. I need to add my new entry in here to bring in my custom CSS file. I find the previous existing entry for my GWC components.css, the default CSS file that's provided by the installation. I go ahead and copy it. I'm going to add a comment so that I know where I've input my CSS file. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste the copy, remove some tabs, and I need to now go and edit my second link. The directory should be the directory specified by the alias, which is GWC, custom GWC/web. And then I need to change my file name to point to my custom CSS file. So I modify it to specify customstyles.css. Notice that I'm adding this change after the default CSS entry. CSS entries are cumulative. New entries cascade over old entries, allowing the new CSS entries to replace existing CSS entries from previous CSS files. Save your changes before you continue. Because I've made changes to the as.xcf file, I have to restart my Genero application server. And because I want to ensure that I'm not using cached values, I start the Genero application server with the -- development flag. Now, when I restart the application, the labels have turned red. And while the CSS used in this example may be simple, it shows you how to use CSS to change how the user interface is shown or displayed within a browser. To summarize, when you need to add CSS, the first thing you do is create an alias for your CSS directory within the as.xcf file. You then create a custom CSS file. You need to modify a template file so that it uses your custom CSS file. And you make sure the template being used is your updated template file.